Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're pulling back the curtain on a story that sits at the intersection of electric vehicles, energy grid management, and the quiet revolution happening in how we think about power itself.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Tonight we've got a fascinating lineup. Rivian just made a move that could turn every EV in your driveway into a grid asset, and we're going to explain exactly what that means for your wallet and for the energy system. Plus, we're diving into cutting-edge research that could reshape battery technology and even our understanding of thermodynamics at the most fundamental level.
But here's what I want you to pay attention to tonight. There's a thread connecting all of these stories, and it's this: the old model of centralized energy, where a few massive utilities generate power and push it down to passive consumers. That model is cracking. And the cracks are getting wider every single day.
That's exactly right, Alex. Whether it's an EV owner getting paid to charge their car at the right time, or a machine learning model predicting battery degradation in real time, the common thread is decentralization and intelligence at the edge. Power is shifting, literally and figuratively.
So stay with us tonight, because by the end of this show, you're going to understand why your next car might be the most important energy asset you ever own. Let's get into it.
Let's start with our lead story. Rivian, the American electric vehicle maker, has just announced a partnership with EnergyHub, a clean energy software firm, and this is a big deal. According to reporting from Electrek, this partnership will make it dramatically easier for Rivian drivers across North America to enroll in utility-run EV charging programs that actually pay customers for charging at grid-friendly times.
Now let me break down what's actually happening here, because the headline doesn't capture the full scope. EnergyHub operates what's called a Distributed Energy Resource Management System, or DRMS. They already work with more than 60 utilities across North America, managing over 2.3 million connected devices. That's thermostats, batteries, EV chargers, and more. What Rivian has done is integrate directly with EnergyHub's platform, so that Rivian vehicles can participate in these utility programs seamlessly.
And here's where it gets interesting from an energy perspective. These aren't just discount programs. These are virtual power plant programs. As CleanTechnica reported, the partnership connects EV drivers with their local virtual power plant. That means your Rivian isn't just a car anymore. It's a flexible grid resource. When the grid is under stress, maybe during a heat wave or a cold snap, utilities can send a signal through EnergyHub to Rivian vehicles, asking them to pause or reduce charging. In return, the driver gets compensated.
Let me put some numbers on this so people understand the scale. Rivian has delivered over 200,000 vehicles. Each one of those vehicles has a battery pack ranging from roughly 75 to 180 kilowatt-hours. If even a fraction of those vehicles participate in these programs, you're talking about a massive distributed battery that utilities can call on during peak demand. That's potentially gigawatt-hours of flexible capacity.
And this is the part that the traditional utility model never anticipated. For a century, the grid was built on the assumption that demand is unpredictable and supply must chase it. You build enough power plants to cover the worst-case peak, and most of the time those plants sit idle. It's enormously wasteful and enormously expensive. Virtual power plants flip that script entirely.
According to Electrek's reporting, the enrollment process is what makes this partnership particularly significant. Previously, if you wanted to join a utility demand response program with your EV, you often had to navigate a confusing process. Maybe your utility had a program, maybe they didn't. Maybe your vehicle was compatible, maybe it wasn't. What Rivian and EnergyHub have done is create a streamlined integration where eligible drivers can discover and enroll in these programs much more easily, potentially right through their Rivian account or vehicle interface.
Now let's talk about who benefits here, because it's not just Rivian drivers. The utilities benefit because they get access to flexible load without building expensive peaker plants. Those peaker plants, by the way, are almost always natural gas-fired, and they're the dirtiest, most expensive power on the grid. Every kilowatt-hour of demand you can shift away from peak is a kilowatt-hour that doesn't come from a gas peaker.
The grid operators benefit because they get more tools to maintain reliability. We've seen in Texas, in California, in the Northeast, what happens when the grid gets pushed to its limits. Rolling blackouts, emergency alerts, people suffering. Distributed energy resources like EV batteries provide a pressure relief valve. And the customers benefit because they're getting paid for something that, in most cases, they won't even notice. If your car charges from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. instead of 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., the difference to you is zero. But the difference to the grid can be enormous.
But let me push back a little, because I think we need to ask the harder question here. Who controls this system? When we talk about virtual power plants, we're talking about aggregating millions of individual assets into a resource that utilities can dispatch. That's enormous power, and right now it's being mediated by private companies. EnergyHub is owned by Alarm.com. Rivian is a publicly traded company with its own shareholders and incentives. The utility programs themselves vary wildly in how much they actually pay customers versus how much value the utility captures.
That's a critical point, Maya. The promise of distributed energy is democratization, right? Power to the people, literally. But if the platform that manages your car's charging is owned by a private company, and the utility that runs the program is a regulated monopoly, and the compensation you receive is a fraction of the value your flexibility provides to the grid, then we haven't really democratized anything. We've just created a new extraction layer.
And this connects to a broader pattern we're seeing across the energy transition. The technology to decentralize power exists. The economic incentives are there. But the governance structures, the regulatory frameworks, the ownership models, those are still stuck in the 20th century. Rivian's move with EnergyHub is genuinely good for drivers and genuinely good for the grid. But the question of who captures the value, that's still very much being negotiated.
I want to also note what this means competitively. Tesla has been doing something similar with its Powerwall and vehicle-to-grid capabilities. Ford has vehicle-to-home with the F-150 Lightning. But Rivian's approach through EnergyHub is notable because EnergyHub already has the utility relationships in place. They're not trying to build a new platform from scratch. They're plugging into the existing utility ecosystem. That's pragmatic, and it could accelerate adoption faster than the more vertically integrated approaches we've seen from Tesla.
Exactly. And for consumers watching tonight, here's what you need to know. If you own a Rivian, check whether your utility participates in EnergyHub programs. If you're shopping for an EV, this kind of grid integration should be on your checklist right alongside range and charging speed. Because the economics of EV ownership are increasingly about more than just fuel savings. Your car can be an asset that earns money while it sits in your garage.
Alright, let's shift gears now to something that might sound like it's from a completely different universe, but stay with me, because it connects more than you might think. A new paper on the AR14, reference 2602.18551, is tackling one of the most important unsolved problems in battery technology, understanding what happens inside a lithium-ion battery as it operates, in real time.
This paper is titled From Static Spectra to Operando Infrared Dynamics, Physics-Informed Flow Modeling and a Benchmark. And I know that sounds like a mouthful, but let me translate. When a lithium-ion battery charges and discharges, a thin layer forms on the electrode surface called the solid electrolyte interface, or SEI. This layer is absolutely critical to battery performance. If it forms well, your battery lasts years. If it forms poorly, your battery degrades rapidly. And right now, studying this layer in real time is extraordinarily expensive and complex.
The technique used to study the SEI in real time is called Operando infrared spectroscopy. Operando means, while operating, so you're literally shining infrared light at the battery while it's working and analyzing the spectral fingerprints that come back. The problem is that the experimental setup is sophisticated, the equipment is expensive, and access to these facilities is limited to a handful of well-funded research labs around the world.
So here's what the researchers did, and this is where it gets clever. They developed a machine learning model, specifically a physics-informed flow matching model, that can take a single static infrared spectrum, essentially a snapshot taken before the battery operates, and predict the entire time-resolved evolution of the spectral fingerprints during operation. In other words, they're using artificial intelligence to simulate what would happen during an expensive experiment, based on a single cheap measurement.
Think about what that means for battery research. Instead of needing $1 million lab setup and days of experimental time to understand how a battery's SEI evolves, a researcher at a university in Lagos or Bogota or Hanoi could take a single static measurement and use this model to get operando quality insights. That is a democratization of scientific capability that we should not underestimate.
And this connects directly to the energy story we've been telling tonight. If we want EVs like Rivian's to serve as grid assets, those batteries need to last. They need to degrade predictably. They need to perform reliably over hundreds of thousands of charge-discharge cycles. Understanding the SEI is foundational to achieving that. Every improvement in battery longevity is an improvement in the viability of the distributed energy future.
The paper also introduces a benchmark dataset, which is significant. One of the biggest problems in applying machine learning to materials science is the lack of standardized datasets. By publishing both the model and the benchmark, these researchers are inviting the entire global community to improve on their work. That's how science should function: open, reproducible, and collaborative.
But let's talk about who's funding this kind of research and who benefits from it. Battery technology is a multi-$100 billion industry. The companies that understand battery degradation best, that can predict it, prevent it, optimize around it, those companies will dominate the energy storage market. If this kind of AI-driven spectroscopy tool gets commercialized, it could give enormous advantages to whoever controls the intellectual property.
That's the tension, isn't it? This paper is on the AR14, it's openly available, and that's great. But the training data, the computational resources to run these models at scale, the engineering expertise to translate academic research into commercial products, those are concentrated in the hands of a few major corporations and well-funded startups. The democratization of the science doesn't automatically mean democratization of the economic benefits.
And for our audience, here's the bottom line. The battery in your EV or your home storage system is going to get better, last longer, and cost less because of research exactly like this. The question is whether those gains get passed on to consumers or captured by shareholders. That's a policy question as much as a technology question.
Now let's move to a story that takes us into truly deep waters. A new paper on the AR14, reference 2602.18482, is examining the thermodynamic behavior of a particular class of black hole, specifically an anti-de Sitter black hole in what's called mod-AMAX electrodynamics, surrounded by a cloud of strings.
Okay, I know what our audience is thinking. What does a black hole have to do with energy news? And the answer is more than you'd expect. This paper is working within the framework of extended phase space thermodynamics, where the cosmological constant is treated as a pressure and the black hole's mass is interpreted as enthalpy. If those words sound familiar from your high school chemistry class, they should. The researchers are applying the same thermodynamic framework we use to understand engines and refrigerators to black holes.
And the specific phenomena they're investigating, like Joule-Thomson expansion and phase transitions, these have direct analogs in the energy systems we use every day. Joule-Thomson expansion is the principle behind your refrigerator and your air conditioning system. When a gas expands through a valve, it cools down. The researchers found analogous behavior in black hole thermodynamics, including inversion curves that separate heating and cooling regions, just like in real-world Joule-Thomson processes.
What's particularly intriguing about this paper is the analysis of what's called Hawking sparsity. Stephen Hawking showed decades ago that black holes emit radiation, now called Hawking radiation. But this radiation is incredibly sparse. The researchers analyze how the parameters of this particular black hole model, including the string cloud parameter and the nonlinear electrodynamics parameter, affect the sparsity of this radiation and the stability of the black hole.
Now here's where this connects to the bigger picture of energy research. The mathematical tools being developed in black hole thermodynamics are increasingly being borrowed by other fields. The phase space methods, the stability analyses, the techniques for understanding phase transitions, these have applications in condensed matter physics, in materials science, and yes, in energy storage and conversion systems. Fundamental physics creates the mathematical vocabulary that applied science uses to solve practical problems.
And there's a philosophical point here that I think is worth making on an energy show. We live in a universe governed by thermodynamics. Every energy system we build, from a coal plant to a solar panel to a lithium-ion battery, is constrained by the same fundamental laws. Research that deepens our understanding of thermodynamics at the most extreme scales, like black holes, ultimately deepens our understanding of what's possible and what's impossible in energy technology.
The paper also examines local and global stability of these black holes through heat capacity analysis and Gibbs free energy landscapes. They found first-order phase transitions analogous to van der Waals liquid-gas transitions. Now, van der Waals phase transitions are exactly the kind of physics that governs how refrigerants work, how supercritical CO2 power cycles operate, and how certain next-generation energy storage systems function. The theoretical tools are transferable.
So while this might seem like the most abstract story in tonight's lineup, it's actually about the deep foundations. You can't build the energy future without understanding the physics that makes it possible. And papers like this one, pushing the boundaries of thermodynamic theory, are laying groundwork that engineers will draw on for decades to come.
Let's stay in the realm of fundamental physics for our next story, but this one has perhaps the most direct near-term energy implications. A paper on the AR14, reference 2602.18482, introduces Boltzmann generators for condensed matter systems using Riemannian flow matching. And before your eyes glaze over, let me explain why this matters for everyone who pays an energy bill.
The fundamental problem this paper addresses is sampling from equilibrium distributions, which is one of the core computational challenges in statistical mechanics. If you want to understand how a material behaves, how its atoms arrange themselves, how energy flows through it, how it responds to temperature changes, you need to sample from these distributions. And for condensed phase systems, meaning liquids and solids rather than gases, this is extraordinarily computationally expensive using traditional methods like molecular dynamics or Monte Carlo simulation.
What the researchers have done is apply a technique called Riemannian flow matching to build generative models that can produce equilibrium samples far more efficiently than traditional methods. The key innovation is incorporating the periodicity inherent to condensed phase systems, the fact that atoms in crystals and liquids exist in repeating patterns, directly into the mathematical framework of the flow model. This is done by working on flat tori rather than in standard Euclidean space.
In practical terms, this means we're getting closer to being able to computationally screen materials at a speed and accuracy that was previously impossible. Want to find a better electrolyte for a solid-state battery? You need to understand its equilibrium properties. Want to design a more efficient thermoelectric material that converts waste heat into electricity? Same thing. Want to develop better catalysts for green hydrogen production? Same fundamental computational challenge.
The paper notes that while flow matching has emerged as a scalable state-of-the-art paradigm for generative modeling, its potential for equilibrium sampling in condensed phase systems remained largely unexplored before this work. That's a significant gap. Condensed matter is where most of the action is in energy technology. Your solar cells, your batteries, your superconductors, your thermoelectrics, they're all condensed phase systems.
And here's what excites me about this from an energy perspective. The traditional approach to materials discovery is slow and expensive. You synthesize a material, test it, iterate, repeat. Computational screening can dramatically accelerate this process, but only if the computational methods are accurate and fast enough. Boltzmann generators built on Riemannian flow matching could be a step change in our ability to computationally explore the space of possible energy materials.
The broader implication is that artificial intelligence and machine learning are not just tools for consumer applications. They're becoming essential infrastructure for fundamental science. The same mathematical techniques that power image generators and language models are being adapted to solve physics problems that have resisted solution for decades. And those solutions have direct implications for energy technology.
But again, let's follow the money and the incentives. Who has the computational resources to run these models at scale? The major tech companies, the well-funded national labs, and a handful of startups backed by venture capital. The research is published openly, which is commendable, but the infrastructure to exploit it is concentrated. If Boltzmann generators accelerate materials discovery, the question is whether the resulting innovations become broadly accessible or get locked behind patent walls.
That's the consistent theme tonight, and I think it's time we pulled all of these threads together. Because when you look at the full picture, from Rivian's virtual power plant integration to AI-driven battery diagnostics to fundamental physics research, you see a single story unfolding.
And that story is this: the technology to build a decentralized, intelligent, efficient energy system is advancing at a breathtaking pace. Every one of the stories we covered tonight represents a genuine step forward. Rivian making it easier for EV owners to participate in grid management. Machine learning models that can predict battery behavior from a single measurement. Computational tools that can accelerate materials discovery by orders of magnitude. Even black hole thermodynamics expanding our theoretical toolkit.
But the technology is running far ahead of the governance. We have 21st century energy technology being deployed within 20th century regulatory frameworks and 19th century ownership models. Utilities are still regulated monopolies in most of the country. Energy markets are still designed around centralized generation. And the value that consumers create by participating in programs like the Rivian Energy Hub partnership is still mostly captured by intermediaries.
Let me put a finer point on it. When a Rivian owner reduces their charging during a grid stress event, they're providing a service that's worth real money. Maybe they get $5 or $10 from their utility program. But the value they've provided to the grid, in terms of avoided peaker plant operation, reduced transmission congestion, and improved reliability, could be many times that. The gap between the value created and the value received is where the profit goes. And right now, it goes to the platform operators and the utilities.
And the same dynamic plays out in research. The papers we discussed tonight are openly published, but the ability to operationalize that research, to turn physics-informed flow models into commercial battery diagnostic tools, to turn Boltzmann generators into materials discovery platforms, that ability is concentrated among well-resourced actors. Open science is necessary but not sufficient for equitable outcomes.
So what should our audience take away from tonight? First, if you own an EV or are considering one, pay attention to grid integration features. The ability to participate in virtual power plant programs is going to become a standard feature, and it could be worth real money to you. Second, battery technology is going to keep getting better. The research pipeline is extraordinary, and AI is accelerating it. That means EV ownership is going to get more economical over time, not less.
Third, and this is the big one, get involved in energy policy. Your local utilities rate design, your state's approach to distributed energy resources, your representatives' votes on energy legislation, these decisions determine who captures the value of the energy transition. The technology is going to advance regardless. Whether the benefits are broadly shared or narrowly concentrated depends on policy choices being made right now.
And for our fellow journalists watching tonight, follow the value chain. When a company announces a partnership like Rivian and Energy Hub, don't just report the press release. Ask how much the customer gets paid. Ask how much the utility saves. Ask who owns the platform and what data they're collecting. The most important stories in the energy transition are not about the technology. They're about who controls it and who profits from it.
That's exactly right. The technology is fascinating, and we love covering it. But technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within power structures, market dynamics, and regulatory frameworks. Our job is to illuminate all of it, not just the shiny parts.
Before we go, I want to highlight one more connection across tonight's stories that I think is underappreciated. Every story we covered tonight involved some form of flow. Riemannian flow matching for material simulation. Flow-based models for predicting spectral evolution in batteries. Even the Joule-Thomson expansion in black hole thermodynamics is fundamentally about flow. And of course, the flow of electricity through the grid, managed by platforms like Energy Hub. The mathematics of flow is becoming the mathematics of energy, from the most abstract theoretical physics to the most practical grid management.
That's a beautiful observation, and it speaks to something we believe deeply on this show. The energy transition is not just an engineering challenge. It's a scientific revolution, and it's happening right now, in real time, across every scale from the subatomic to the planetary. And understanding it requires journalists who are willing to do the hard work of connecting those scales.
For Truth Report, I'm Maya Clarity.
And I'm Alex Truth. We'll see you next time. Keep asking the hard questions, keep following the money, and keep demanding better from the systems that power your life.